The world is changing rapidly, and a new paradigm of leadership is emerging. A way of leading with more heart and soul. And on this fifth season of the Vulnerable Power Show, we share the practical insights, leading edge skills, and potent wisdom to equip you for this future paradigm unfolding today. Learn from visionary leaders, spiritual entrepreneurs, innovative founders, all who have done the inner work and soul searching to transform and step up into their calling and mission, leading with their vulnerable power. These soulful and heartfelt deep dives will teach you how to develop self-mastery, step into your soul's calling, embrace your gifts and genius, and lead from a service-oriented mindset. So you too can be empowered to do this transformative inner work and step up as the ascending leader you came here to be. Together, let's bring more heart and soul back to leadership around the world. Welcome back to the tail end of the fifth season of the Vulnerable Power Show. And we have had a jam-packed season, and today I have a very, very potent guest, somebody that guided me last summer and is also a facilitator and I'll say a master teacher at the Deep Living Lab, which we've heard from the co-founder earlier, Roxanne, if you haven't seen her episode. Very vital for the work we're going to cover today with Marcia. Was also at that, let's say, center. And last summer, I had the privilege of being guided by Marcia. And what I would say is the more advanced inner work. And that's what we're going to dive into today, this notion of the inner work journey and how the deeper we go, the more awe and wonder is activated. As this work starts to unravel for us, unfold for us, it becomes more multidimensional, and we tend to be challenged in various ways. So today we're going to have Marcia, who's been a pioneer, and I would say is in the millennial languaging OG, very much somebody who's been a few decades in the trenches, as I would call it, guiding leaders in this work. And so without further ado, I want to introduce Marcia and warm you up and say hello, the proverbial how you doing?
It's great to be with you, Haas. It's going to be fun to talk. Always fun to talk with you.
Yeah, we're gonna have the opportunity to really get into what I would say is not only vulnerability and the power. We're gonna touch upon things that I sense is right up your proverbial alley, and not everybody has the luxury to have done the inner work like I did, have a sabbatical and be able to do this back to back and consistently. It tends to be a challenge. More and more people are gravitating to the work we're going to dive into today, the more advanced. How do you do this deeper inner work? Things that really gravitate towards the advanced stages. So I'm curious if we start with how you got into it, your own, let's say, proverbial inner work journey before you became a practitioner, which you now guide others that support
Yeah,
uh, leaders, so to speak. So I say, start there if that feels resonant for you to start talking about
sure,
what was your experience with inner work, and then maybe we can start to flesh out what does inner work even mean, and we'll start riffing from there.
sure. Um, Having been an internal leader in lots of different environments, corporate, nonprofit, small business, everything. And but I'd say in my 40s, I hit a wall in that well, my cousin said to me, "You're not laughing anymore. That catches your attention."
Hmm.
And I had been part of a huge project that was meant to really transform an organization. And I was the lead of this project. It was a deeply honored project, and it flopped. And I don't like failure. Do a lot to avoid failure. And it was just this, okay, like it's almost like bringing your feet to the ground, as it were, that combination. And at the same time, two other women said, there's got to be a better way. These other two women, we sat around the kitchen table and they said, what we're doing is not life affirming. There has got to be a different way. And with those two women, we started an exploration, not part of anything formal, just knowing in our hearts that there was something we're up against as women, as leaders, as in all kinds of ways of our life, basically. And so that started that journey long, long time ago, in my 40s. Yeah.
So how would you define inner work? Because actually I had somebody the other day, somebody I was actually on the show, Annabella, asked, what do you mean by inner work? And I would say various people have various definitions, and there may be some universality between us that we could flush out. So starting with that, I mean, how do you look at it as a practitioner? What do you call inner work, or how do you define the element?
Inner work.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny too? And sometimes it's viewed as like soft work, and it's actually some of the hardest, takes the most courage. Um, because everything I used to be waterline consulting, and the point was everything that you see is driven by what's below the waterline. You know, that whole iceberg metaphor, which Roxanne Hall Murphy also uses, was that if you don't even take the time to notice what story that you are living out, if you don't take the time to really deeply understand the ways you get in your own way. There's just so many things to talk about, but it's basically all that is unseen that shows up as seen. All
Mm.
that is that we carry in our bodies, that we carry in our hearts, we carry in our minds.
Mm, I love that. Yeah, I would say the hidden dimensions, right? From the
Mhm.
energetic sciences perspective, from my lens, it's restoring this natural blueprint. And I love earlier when you spoke to this precipice for you, let's call it, not laughing anymore. I mean, that is so interesting as an indicator, because and then leading to flopping with grace. I would say that those are two symptoms, right? You didn't call it
Yeah,
flopping. I would say learning how to fail with grace, for a lack of a
yeah.
better description. And so you take these two things. I'm not laughing anymore, or a family member saying that to you. You're sitting around with other female leaders at the time, which how many years ago? I mean, we're talking 20, 30 decades, a couple
Well,
decades.
that we met about 3 years, at least quarterly. And then we're from different parts of the country. And then we invited other women to join us and set up a women's leadership community that started in 97.
So this
So,
became
yeah.
like a circle or a community, which is now all the rage, and I sense where we're headed as a
Hmm.
collective paradigm. So I love that
Yeah.
because you brought out so many things already early on, and I added this flopping with grace, which I sense we're going to get into. So I like this. What's below inner work, from your definition, is what's below the surface, what's happening on a, let's say, operational level in the unseen realms. Does that
Yeah. And it's
encapsulate what you're bringing forth, more or less?
that's such a good question. The thing is, yeah, there's something I want to say that's important to say around inner work is it's not about fixing yourself. It's
Mm.
about remembering this, and you alluded to this earlier. It's remembering your essential nature. It's remembering this luminous being that you came into the earth as. And so I think in the early decades, I was really trying to fix, polish those rough edges and not have a shadow because heaven forbid I be wholly human. So, so the inner work is really important. Even the word work perhaps is the wrong word because it makes it
Mm.
sound like efforting, right?
Mm.
As opposed to the inner exploration.
Mm.
I'm just playing here, but
I like that. And it's certainly the constructs we use do make people afraid of it. I think given what you said earlier, I feel and think, well, given what you said earlier, right out the gate, that this is difficult work. There are people more and more suffering. We're seeing the data. I mean, you're in the trenches longer than I've been. I would say that if you were to zoom out even more than now, it's become, leadership development, coaching, inner work, inner exploration is becoming all the proverbial trend. People are suffering more. Leaders especially are wanting this
mhm.
new way, as you put it, and I love this. You're already bringing it out the gate. Life affirming, supporting the expansion of life, talking about remembering your nature, words that from my prism, from the energetic sciences prism, is very much, and I love that. It's not fixing, it's restoring, it's remembering, it's bringing
Yeah.
back. And you already used luminous body, which is the biofield. It is what science is catching up with these ancient kooky
Mm.
mystics and wisdom teachers, which were the early spiritual scientists.
Yeah.
So let's unpack this some more and riff from here. So remembering the nature, what from your lens, this not laughing anymore. What did you lose? What did you forget? What was dismembered that you had to remember in terms of these early stages before you became a practitioner, which is where we're going to really get into?
Yeah, I don't know that I would have said it back then, but that failure, which I was not graceful, by the way, just to be, I maybe I looked it, but I didn't
You're
feel it.
graceful now. I'm inviting everybody to see failure as an opportunity to
Failure is
fail with
okay. It's
grace.
okay
Yeah.
to fall down when you fail. Um, but in hindsight, it wasn't that I had a longing, I guess is maybe a way to say it. I had a longing for for something more, so for something. I had a feeling there was something more. And the whole failure thing was such a gift for my identity. It's like, who am I if I fail? Oh my God, can I live with myself? But it's like, am I more than what I do? Am I more than a success or failure? And so all of that was present. And at the time, I was spending a fair bit of time with my dear beloved colleagues working on what's the story I'm living out? What's the story of how I have to be, what's the old story. And we were looking both individually held, but also in our culture,
Mm,
how much the story, and like you said, the language makes a reality. And so we had the story of our mechanistic control everything culture. Um, so that's where we were working the first number of decades. And then we are also working in the realm of art to try to figure out we knew more than we knew we knew. And so I'll figure out a way to get to it. I mean, this is hindsight. I didn't know at the time. At the
mm.
time we're just experimenting, just trying stuff.
Well, I love that because you said exploration, and I feel like that I didn't maybe bring this cohesively back around why I feel like it needs to be work because with this longing, even you used it back then, you had a longing for something more. I sense leaders have this longing, be given what's happening in the flux and the chaos and all the turbulence of the shift into this new paradigm. It's difficult enough. It's becoming even scarier for
Yeah,
people to look at the stories we tell ourselves, stuff we're going to unpack very beautifully. You're already foreshadowing it, let's say, myths that, very much what you're all about, the myths we tell ourselves, and, what have I missed? One of your books, so to
yeah,
speak,
yeah.
and constructs, beliefs, all this. So I love how you're bringing that out the gate. So would you say you were an early adopter? Is that fair to say? I mean, looking back, hindsight's 2020. Would you say, in terms of this bell curve of the collective, you were an early adopter doing what you were doing with these pioneering women, these
With those
cohorts,
other
so to
women,
speak?
I'd say they were early adopters and I was the practical applicator of their work. Yes, I mean, back then, there wasn't so much on circles. There wasn't so much on that the worldview we're using is skewing the reality we think we have to live. Um, so yeah, that we were what the language we were using back then is more common now. But history's of course thousands of years old. I mean, it's not like we've made this stuff up. It's got deep roots for sure.
Well, that's why I honor. I mean, I'm a young blood in this lifetime, and I honor those like yourself that have been the way showers and the early adopters because it's a luxury now that we have as practitioners and kind of shifting a conversation more into the where you're at now as a practitioner, supporting those that support others, or as I call it, activating the activators. It's challenging to have been in the trenches and stay true, and that's why I feel like today you're going to flush out so much wisdom because now what I'm seeing in the marketplace is it's sad. There's trends and they're not tried and true. And so it's refreshing to hear what we're going to unpack today. It's not new even from your lens. It's we're as a collective rediscovering, let's say, some old stuff, adding to it, expanding on that, let's say, that old universal technology, for lack of a better description. And I love how you've stayed true and kept going because I would say it's a luxury we have now as practitioners that we don't sound as out there or fringe because these are hidden dimensions that impact us
Yeah.
below the surface, as you all put it in Deep Living Lab. So it's scary. So I commend you because that's why I feel like you're going to bring more gold nuggets than you already have already out the gate because it is difficult as a practitioner to stay true to one's values. So is there anything that you feel inspired to share there of how to stay true if you've been in the trenches or you're new in the trenches? What can you speak to as that grit, that alignment to stay true to the
Yeah.
work you're doing?
Oh man, there's not one answer for that one, Haas. I mean,
Yeah.
I think in the early days it was being part of a circle, was being part of a community for support. Because at that point I couldn't hold myself as well as a circle could hold me. And so I needed that space to unlearn, relearn, whatever language you want to use. I need that space, that loving, my loving into being kind of space, which I could not do for myself back then. It was pretty harsh internal environment. And that is a really key part of it. The teachers, the teacher like Wendy Palmer, conscious embodiment, leadership embodiment, the teachers that brought me into my body, which I thought had nothing to do with leadership whatsoever, like, just have answers. Um, that was really pivotal for me to sink into a different level of resilience and groundedness. Um, at that point, there's no shame in keep learning. Like, I think earlier I thought, well, I should have it by now. What's wrong with me? I've been leading for decades. I should know this stuff. And it's only when you've done the work enough that if that's like, oh, no, that's the work. I mean, to keep learning is the work because there's always another layer, as we've talked about before, you and I.
Mm.
Um, and that's like exciting. That's not like what's wrong with me. Oh, wow, I hadn't even seen myself do that before, but there we are. There's a story that I've been carrying. I didn't even know I had. Yeah.
I like that. It seems like it's a growth mindset as a practitioner.
Hmm.
The curious or the childlike wonder, as they say in some traditions, to keep that fire alive within, let's say, as a practitioner, and
Yeah.
to stay going down the path.
Something I want with that, there's something you said earlier that I was thinking about the perhaps increased demand or increased interest in for leaders and others to grow. And I think part of it is because with the amount of change, which has always been huge, but the amount of change, like you can't change when you're holding on tight. You can't. And so that when you mention growth mindsets, yeah, that's just part of that resilience thing. Is like, oh, I didn't know that yet.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How did you know? Because you similarly popped the question into my mind when you said it's like a cooking, a ripening. How did you know you were ready to support others and that you'd done enough inner work? Because that for me is always, as a perfectionist, as a type A, I'm like, am I, and then with what we're going to get into, talk about stories, the inner critic, which is very much a lot of the work that you taught last year in the workshop and a lot of the undercurrent of Deep Living Lab. How did you deal, whether you want to talk about it through the lens of the inner critic? How did you deal as a practitioner? Say, okay, I've done enough of my own inner work, inner exploration that I'm safe enough to guide others. Um, because it is such a subjective question. Sure, you can get certified, even with practicum and coaching or going to your center and get. I would say I would if I'd still be like, "Ugh." So how did you deal with that inner litmus test, let's call it, of I'm ready, I've ripened enough, I'm ready to support others.
That's such a good question too, because so many people put themselves, hang their shingles, or put themselves in that position when they're not really ready, able to hold themselves, let alone another. Um, I was told I should move into coaching about a decade before I did. I didn't want to do any harm. And knowing identifies the type three, if you know the Enneagram, performing as part of my story has been. And so I didn't want to have a coaching engagement be about me. I wanted to be there. And so it took me quite a while to I did it in groups. I did peer coaching, that kind of thing. I could ease off my ego then. But one to one, I was slow to move into because it felt like really a precious connection with somebody, and to not and didn't and so to know that I could hold my feet on the ground and not be attached to how I looked to them was a really key piece. And so I don't know that there was an answer. I still sometimes don't think I show up that great in some coaching times,
It's never
but
ending, as you put it earlier. That's why
yeah,
I couched it as a growth mindset because
yeah. But
it's
it's
you're
but
constantly expanding. Sorry, keep going.
no, no, no. It's just so I think it's still always a question. Am I ready to teach this? Am I ready to facilitate this? Um, and to hold that lightly. Because if I go in attached that I am, then I'll probably be performing and probably be a little more tight and a little bit more restricted, as opposed to co-learning and bringing what I have, but being open to what else is there.
I like that. Seems like the lawyer in me breaks down axiomatic elements. So it sounds like you got something that Roxanne's episode, right? How do you hold yourself? And you talked about
Yeah.
earlier the circles. You're already bringing this key vital skill, which is why I said it's foundational. If you haven't watched it and you're joining it this episode, go back and watch Roxanne's episode on what it actually means to hold space for yourself. Sounds like you can
Yeah.
hold yourself. Others told you. That's something I'm going to come back to in a moment. That there's some not detachment. You're selfless, for a lack of a better. You want to be in service. Maybe that's the synonym for it. And training. I would say there seems to
Oh,
be four
yeah.
things you flushed out, and the training seems to be, like you were saying, practicum. The others told me is interesting because my Qigong instructor once told me the way you know your stance is good is, you have this internal compass, and I call it
Hmm.
sonar. When the other leg of your stance is the outside, it helps you objectively know, hey, I must be ripe, ready, for this because now the outside of this holographic expression is telling me as well. So I love that because there has to be a detachment. There has to be a humbling of there's a sacredness here as you're already speaking to it as well. So I love that. Thank you for answering that impromptu question because like you said, yeah, it's never ending. I call it a cruising altitude. You do reach a mastery stage. Yes, you still kind of
Yeah.
go up. There is a comfort, a confidence, shall we say, that we develop as practitioners that comes with these elements, shall we say.
Well, it's a mindfulness quality too, because it's not like I'm selfless 100% of the time, like
Yeah.
in a coaching, right? So it's a mindfulness, like a client what might say something, and I'll notice myself thinking, "Ooh, how does that reflect on me?" And I think, "Okay, I'm here. Come back, open the heart." So it's my Wendy Palmer, my Aikido conscious embodiment teacher. She said, that her masters says not like you don't get up pulled off center. It's just that you're more quick to identify that you have been pulled off and have more capacity to come back to a grounded, centered place to be present.
It's that coming back to center. Let's jump into that because I know that's something we were intending to flow into, and it feels like an organically good time to go into it. This notion of the embodied work, right? Because I think
Yeah.
earlier, one of the ways you worded it before we started recording today was this notion of dropping the stories and dropping into the body. And you're already mentioning one of the pioneering female leaders of embodiment, Wendy Palmer. I've come across her before we connected, and her name, so to speak, and how she
Yeah.
was like one of the teachers of the teachers of the teachers, so to speak, in a lineage that is being brought forth. So, what does that look like for you? And then how do you teach it? But twofold question. This notion
Yeah.
of catching yourself, you called it mindful embodiment. Coming back to center is an Aikido. I sense Wendy got that from the Japanese Zen and
Hmm.
Bushido arts that she was influenced by. However, you want to answer this, because I feel like already you're bringing it out so many different times that you got to catch yourself. You got to be able
Yeah.
to use Roxanne's terminology. You got to hold yourself. You got to be able to come back to center. Various synonyms for this inner mechanism of being like, what's happening right now, which is a byproduct of advanced work, having done it enough that you can catch it quicker, come back to center. So how do you want to speak to that? What feels inspired to share, both personally and then how do you teach it, etc.?
Well, when I first worked with Wendy, it was totally, I had no sensations. What do you notice? I know nothing. I noticed nothing. Um, and so it has been, that's evident practice in our culture. It's like, oh, there are sensations here. Um, with the early days, it was really noticing reactive patterns in my embodied way. I mean, I have a very clear, and we all do have a very clear response to whatever trigger, and I get argumentative and I get emotional and I hide my deeper truth, hide, to stay safe. And so that was just really helpful in the early on. It's like, triggered. I feel it. I notice it. Leaning in. I got it. Um, and that was like 101. Um, as I learned with Roxanne and the somatic part of coaching and the Enneagram, which we could talk about, is very much tied to embodiment. Um, that even deepened my awareness of my somatic tells, my I mean, I wouldn't have known. Would I have known? I don't know that. I don't think I knew before the Enneagram that my heart was as closed off as it was. Because in my internal experience, I had a very tender heart. But as I look back, it's like, oh, I was very practiced at shutting it off, blocking
Hmm.
it, not everybody seeing it. Um, and so the combination of of Wendy's work and then working with Roxanne and the Enneagram deepened it. And how do you teach it? Um,
I feel like you're already
slowly.
teaching it as you speak to it. Keep going. I mean, I've got some, I've unpacked what you said. Keep going. We'll
Yeah.
summarize. Yeah,
Well, a
yeah.
lot of it is just, I mean, the fundamental is the noticing. Just drop your attention to your interior experience, like right now, and what do you notice? Is there, and to do it without judgment. Man, that is such a key. I didn't know that at the beginning, and I'd say, oh, I shouldn't feel tight. What's wrong with me? No, I feel a little tightness in my diaphragm right now, for example. And that just is. Now I might get curious about it. Is there something that's there that'd be helpful to understand? And before I even had a practice in this, my body would tell me stuff like I knew I needed a sabbatical a while back. I knew I needed it, and it wasn't practiced in somatics, but my back kept clenching up every time I got on an airplane. Um, and I took drugs. I took muscle relaxers. You're like,
You're
okay,
not
I got to keep
alone.
working, right? Yeah. And
Alcohol's the
so
drug, the most
there's
common.
always this, yeah, exactly. It's like or numb out some way. So there's a lot of tells there.
Hmm.
But it is a practice, and also it's a practice of discerning what the tell is, because my your head wants to jump right in and say, I know what it is. I can tell you. It's because you should do this or be that. And
Which
it's really
compounds it because then you're mentalizing
exactly,
it's ego on
exactly.
ego and you're not actually digging in. So I love this. Let me
Yeah.
paraphrase because this is what I'm seeing again, brilliantly being brought out in what you're saying it. You notice the reactions, this notion of the interior exploration. You then, how does this show up in my body? Not dismissing, suppressing, negating, disassociating, whatever word, many of them equal the same result. Why you weren't laughing before you weren't really here. The soul was, let's say, gone.
Mhm.
So how is this showing up in my body? Noticing what's happening in the interior. How's this showing up in my body? And then leaning in this curious exploration. And it seems like that leads to the word I've been using, mastery, because it's mastery of the patterns. You called them tells. Once you do this, there's a muscle. And
Mhm.
it seems like that's what you're speaking to, or societal numbness. Because I spoke about this in the last episode. It was only a solo episode I've done so far. End of last season. People can check it out. You're touching on it. I was numb. You were
Mhm.
numb. This is a common denominator in our society, which we're going to get to later. The myths. What have I myth? Societal constructs.
Yeah.
It seems like society doesn't do us any favors because we're negating this inner intelligence, this body intelligence. You're speaking to very advanced stuff. Again, very early on, I'm unpacking it and it's very beautifully worded because that numbness I sense is universal too, and we're overlooking it
Of course.
culturally.
Yeah. The story where it really hit home. I mean, I had studied with Wendy for a period of time at this point, and I was in studying with Roxanne, and I was working with a coach. And most coaches, when you go to with a problem, and this is fine, it works well for a lot of people, but they help you problem solve it, right? So I went to my coach. I being had my own business, bag lady fears
Hmm.
deeply in my being. My
Hmm.
single mother raised me. Is there going to be enough money? Always, right? Deeply in me. And so I went to him and my coach, and I'm saying, oh my God, I don't know if I have enough work and, providing for my family.
Hmm.
And usually, we jump into, okay, what marketing strategies you're using and, whatever. But he just said, okay, well, just tell me what you notice in your body as you say that. And I was like, all right, fine. Well, I notice my head's like, ideas, trying to fix it. And my heart feels like it's just so tight and worried. And he said, okay, well, what do you notice in your belly center? It's like, there's nothing there. He said, well, just take the time because the body's slower. Take your time. And my belly was like, it's all going to be fine. It was the most, and everything else just kind of softened. It's like,
Hmm.
right, this is like Chicken Little, that old children's story. It's like, But if I dropped in, I knew deeply in me that I would be fine. I had the resilience to deal with whatever, you know. And so that I didn't make it happen. I just allowed myself to be with it long enough, which is often feels like magic because it's often softens the hold of a pattern.
Wow, so much there. Healing is automatic. So that last point, I love how you brought that out. That if we do the work, let's call it this inner work, in a way, and I appreciate this that you're referencing the Enneagram that Roxanne, teaches and is fundamental for deep living, or let's say it's a foundation of the deep living lab.
Yeah.
Using a framework is important. And I love how you're highlighting the frameworks and the lineages that influenced you. Wendy Palmer had a framework, Roxanne's using Enneagram, and now you're contributing to it as a teacher in that. And I want to unpack a couple of things here because listening to the body intelligence leads to this notion of being with it softens it. Healing is automatic. It's oftentimes we're in our own ways. Vibrational medicine confirms this. The latest in energy medicine is confirming this. So talk to us about that. And then I want to get into what many call shadow work, for lack of a better description, because you brought it up again, dealing with the deep rooted fears that were embedded in you, let's say. Your wording that I feel like you almost
Mhm.
used verbatim. Where do you want to start? Do you want to go choose your own adventure? Do you want to go dealing with the deep rooted fears or talking more about this listening to the body intelligence? You're already giving great
Yeah.
examples and epitomizing it. Which door would you like to go into first?
Well, let's talk about the body embodied reflection. And I think it's really
Okay.
important to add a few words around that because it's not a trick. It's
Hmm.
not, I'm not trying to make happen anything. And so when you're attached to, okay, if I do this, then I'll move through it, you don't fool yourself that way. So it's really that like real curiosity, real space, real compassion, and non-attachment. So it's an invitation, not a demand. So I think that's a really important part of the any reflections we do at the inner work is do it with invitation. Because who's demanding? It's the ego, not our deeper nature. And it's our ego that's saying, okay, let's get this right. Let's do this body thing so we can fix this. We're so sneaky that way. So that feels incredibly important that it's all of this work, all of the inner work. We create an invitation. It's like inviting you into this hospitable space that could invite the possibility of new awareness is coming. But eh, let go of making it happen. That was the first thing. The second one about go
Well,
ahead.
before we go there, the embodied reflection, I like that because yeah, back to constructs and how we, let's say, prompt it. And I would agree 100 million percent. This notion that's now pop psychology and it's in the new age and feel it to heal it. I call it mentalizing. And that's why so many advanced people find me and they go, I've already done this work. How come it's not working? You're thinking about doing the work more than actually doing the feeling to heal it. And I love how the prompt of even wording it as embodied reflection, the
Mhm.
construct that you're bringing forward, how you're framing it, and invitation, not a demand. I would say either route gets you to the same, let's say, conclusion, which is you will not mentalize, which bypasses it. Which, from a science
Yeah.
perspective, it's stored in our cells. We're going to get to this when we talk about deep. I mean, you even worded it this way this deep rooted fear in me that my single mother, it's in the cells, man. You
Mhm.
cannot
Mhm.
trick yourself, as you're putting it, Marcia, out of it. I'm gonna feel it to heal it. It's got to be this natural, and we're going to unpack this more and more, a yin-based form of healing, right? You're talking
Mm.
about what we're going to unpack, whether we intend to or not, this feminine construct, a feminine energetic, not feminine as in I'm a woman, this circles, yin-based invitation, calling it embodied reflection, which we're going to unpack more and more, I
Okay.
sense, this notion of these
Yeah.
old constructs, especially with Middle Eastern culture, Western cowboy culture, this notion you got to push through, man and
Yeah.
wow, man. You got to, so I love that. You're already doing a lot there. So now, door number two, deep rooted fears. Oof, that's the nature of what this work and exploration is scary. Many have traumas, many have conditioning,
Yeah.
many have inherited healing, people that didn't know any better and that they passed it on and we're dealing with a lot of intergenerational stuff.
Yeah.
How do you want to speak to that? How did you start tackling these deep rooted fears, which is a great segue from listening to the body intelligence, inviting it in, embodied reflection. You had to do it
Mm,
that way, I sense.
yeah. Well, I'll say that. I didn't tackle my deep
I
rooted
use that.
fears.
Look at me using male wording, alpha wording. Let's tackle it and crush it.
Let's make this go away. Yeah, yeah. You know, well, you mentioned that you and I did that inner critic stuff earlier, and
Yeah.
that was a really important companion to any of this work
Mm.
um, because if you can't discern an inner critic, super ego, cop in the head, inner terrorist voice. It sounds like conscience. And so and it's a really harsh environment in which to do any inner reflection. And that awareness, and this was in Roxanne's book, Deep Living. It was like a line in this thick, thick book. If you want to do one thing to enhance your well-being and change your relationship with the inner critic. And I thought, yeah, I don't know what that would be. But that's been proved quite pivotal, to be present with myself with whatever is there. Um, and to not make it binary, wrong, bad, good, right, wrong. Um, the other piece, so and the other piece of that, what the Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer's work on self-compassion is like, and you alluded to this in terms of like this, just this nurturing, loving yourself into being, because we do this stuff for good reason. It's not like it served us in some way, and so to make it not okay or something I have to fix is the ego again. Um, the other thing about the deep-rooted fears that's where the Enneagram came in. I mean,
Mm.
I'm relatively new to the Enneagram compared to a lot of my colleagues. I'm only like 15 years in. Um, and
I
I
love how
thought, oh, why
you
do
all say that's young. I'm
it is. Well, most of my colleagues have decades, but
Mm.
um, I thought, I've been in leadership development for years at this point. I know all these different tools and instruments. I think, but I went to a couple day workshop on it, and it was, it just, there's my patterns in language I didn't even know, and I found quite abhorrent and cringeworthy at the beginning. Um, but that ancient tool, that ancient map, but maybe map's a better word than tool, um, helped me understand some of my deepest fears with a lot of heart, a lot of gentleness, a lot of guidance for what's movement. That's the thing about the Enneagram compared to other things. It's like someone says, if anyone's done an Enneagram workshop, they say you are a number. Hold that lightly because yes, I have a dominant pattern, but I'm much more than those presenting behaviors. So honestly, there were things I had been doing self-development circles for uh, at that point 20 some years, and I was like, oh my God, look at this. Look what how I the constructs in which they're guiding what I see as my only choice here. Um, so I can't say that they're not, there's still a lot there,
Mm.
because like you said, carry it in the body, it's generational, but
It's like
it,
onions. I think you and I have spoken
mhm,
to it before, right? It's like
yeah.
onion layers, and like onions, the more you peel back, the more you cry, the more you purge and release, so to speak.
It's true. It's a great, yeah, it's true. And interestingly, after I finished with a year with Roxanne and her colleagues, I had those women that I started the women's leadership with, did that reflection years ago. Um, they noticed a difference in me.
Mm.
They noticed the difference. They said, uh, I don't know if they exactly said this word. This is the interpretation I had. I was like, you're more open-hearted than you used to be.
Mm.
And I think, yeah, that's true. I am. I have more capacity to access my heart than I used to have. And I didn't make that happen. Uh, it's just,
It's a natural byproduct. The muscle, unlike a traditional muscle training, this muscle cannot be willed in the traditionals. It can't be used, which is what we're going to unpack later. This notion of we're already bringing it out, this yin based, and the listeners that are new to that verbiage will unpack. So I love this. The role of compassion in this let's say inner work, healing, early stages, we call it healing in my parlance. Gentleness, it's tattooed on my alpha hand, my right wrist, one of my early tattoos, be gentle. So I love that.
Mm,
You have to have that self-compassion, that
yeah.
gentleness, which goes to what you said before that the inner critic and this roadmap of how Enneagram helped you in seeing the patterns, which goes to what we said earlier, right? Noticing the reactions, how it shows up in your body, leaning in and exploring it curiously, and then you master, you start to see these tells, you start to see these reactions more, you catch them quicker, you come back to center more, you retain that embodied awareness more, that true nature more. So I love how you've unpacked then the inner critic in terms of that seems to be this inner divide that we're dealing with. That the adversary in advanced mysticism, they say that there is no devil. The devil is within us. It's this inner critic. It's this
Mhm.
super ego that you use the psychosynthesis term for it, right? Or the Freudian term. It's this part of us. And if
Yeah.
anything, science is showing us this is one hologram. It's all happening
Yeah.
within. The more you go to these hidden dimensions, the more
Yeah.
awesome and scary and awesome it becomes. So I love how you brought that out. That then the compassion has to go with this. It's a dance, as I've come to learn, which is what we're going to get into. I sense with circles and more of the yin
Hmm.
stuff that influenced me, which is one of the reasons I wanted you to speak to this when we met. And I said, hey, does it feel inspired to co-create? Because I feel like so many people are also teaching the divine feminine or the yin based without actually understanding and living it. And in your instance, you've had to live it both as a female and in the polarity game that everybody, male and female, has to do. Um, Talk to me a little bit more on if you're comfortable with it, however raw you want to go. What does it look like in terms of the layers of that deep rooted fear that's embedded in us? Because we're dancing around it in various ways and speaking to it directly and indirectly. We start to think a lot and we start to then think we're doing it. And let's say we bypass that with everything we're bringing through. We get embodied, we catch it, we do it in the yin way, which we're going to unpack more.
Hmm.
There's always layers to it. And then
Hmm.
when we get to the root of the fear, let's call it inner child healing or intergenerational healing, there's various routes to it. What did that look like from a personal level? For the audience listening, when you get to the advanced stages, it's scary, it's harrowing, it can feel never ending and hopeless. And that, right? I mean, you grew up with it. How am I going to uproot this scarcity mindset that's
Yeah.
embedded in me?
Mm.
That's in my cells intergenerationally. Like my Persian culture had it many generations. I don't know if it also had that component for you and how you
Oh
carry.
yeah. Oh yeah.
So that's
Um,
hard stuff. So how did you deal with that on a personal level? Because it's harrowing when you're in that.
wouldn't you just love to have a tidy 10 steps program for that?
Yeah, right. We
It's just,
can't. It's a
a lot of
dance.
people
It's
sell those, but
it's an art, not a science per se. Even if we want to
it
encapsulate it.
is. It
Yeah.
really is. That's where mything or working in the symbolic realm helped a lot.
Okay.
Um, because I was able to access a deeper knowing. I think that's the thing. Oh, there's so many things in what you just said. I'm not a therapist. I don't heal inner child stuff. Um, I can support people in being present and with what is and help them and help hold that exploration uh, with heart. This is what I love. I mean, when you're talking about the deep work, this is why Roxanne's latest work has been so profound for me. Honestly,
Hmm.
in the last couple of years with her work, her book, The Four Portals, is coming out soon, if not now. Um, but it's these levels of inquiry, and every time you go back, it's different. Like, am I able to belong to myself? Am I able to find my security in me, or am I looking outside of me? Do I trust my being in constant change? Do I have an old story of inadequacy that's still, am I trying to control everything? So that's the second portal of trust. And the third portal of connectedness around, is my heart defended? Is it feeling? Is it truthful? Is it surrendered? I mean, so these, and then the last one, sacred engagement, engaged presence, the name has changed the last months, but where's my action coming from? And so in each of these portals, each of these, this map of reflection, every time I do it, I see where the ego identity is still constricting me. Um, and again, no judgment with that. It's like a thing I gotta fix. It just, oh, look at that. I am noticing that I'm trying to impress this person I just met. Huh, look at that. And so I'm not giving you a direct answer to your question about how to heal the,
Oh, you
because
gave me a
I
direct
don't know. I
answer.
don't know.
Whether you chose to call it indirect or not, I feel it was direct because, I mean, you brought out how the mything and symbolic work, which we're going to unpack more and more in your book that you gifted me that I held up. What have I myth? It's allowing you to access. We're back to this deeper knowing, whether it be your body intelligence, which science is verifying is an actual intelligence other than the intellect. And
Yeah.
you're talking about heart intelligence a lot. So these three brains, so to speak. So that was another Enneagram mything and symbolic work as an
Yeah.
access point. And the second thing, levels of inquiry. I mean, I do what I call it is ascension science. It's not new. It's becoming a thing now because we're realizing there's levels to these vibrations that we hold within us. So I
Mhm.
love how you even called it levels of inquiry. As you
Yeah.
went deeper and deeper, these roadmaps helped you, these frameworks helped you. Enneagram, mything, symbolic work, which we're going to experience let's say, real visceral way together. And I love this because I wanted to bring this out, and and you brought it out organically, which is how we do it here on the Vulnerable Power Show. By dissolving these stories, which are stored in the body, we find true safety. You'd said that to me before, and the work I
Mhm.
experienced with you all in your class that Roxanne spoke at was a masterful advancement of my awareness of, ooh, here's a micro tell. Here's a new micro tell. Here's a new reactive pattern stored in my body that matches the story I have to dissolve to then nullify it. You said something in one of the workshops you hosted, and I got a recording of, and I was like, I'm going to bring this up. And I even told you I'm going to bring it up. I'm bringing it up now because it seems like a lot of what you started saying right there in your indirect answer was do not abandon yourself. When I heard those words in this recording, I was like, ooh, this is juicy because you're talking about true safety. You're referencing Roxanne's work as being pivotal, which is why I said go back to that episode, audience, if you haven't already, the first episode of this proverbial season. Tell us more about what you meant there, because the audience didn't hear the recording like I did. What, if you, to refresh your memory, was one of the workshops that you did, and yeah, because you guys
I
chose that
remember.
excerpt because it was hot. There was a lot of
Yeah.
bioelectromagnetic energy flowing through you as the transmitter.
That was actually a friend of mine who said that, and it just landed in me.
Yeah, talk to us about that. What did you
Well,
mean,
it's
and
just
what's
that.
the context? Yeah.
Well, in that particular case, she was in a presentation where she was being challenged and noticing her reflexive pattern to like, who do I think I am? Or if it had been my reflexive pattern, it would have been, wait a minute, I would have fought her. But she noticed it, and she noticed the reflexive pattern, and just like coming back to center. She noticed it and just felt her feet and thought, do not abandon yourself here. You have your own experience, and you can share that, but you don't have to share it. And we can share it with an open heart. You can share it and just say, "And what's your experience?" So it shifts everything, whether you speak up or not. In a do you know? Are you withholding your voice? Do not abandon yourself. It's foundational that it's so freeing when I can hold my own being. I can find my internally sourced love, belonging, security. This is Roxanne's work. When I can find that, I am so much freer to have you be you and me not be attached to you, be whoever you are, because It's okay. I can hold space for you, but if I'm attached. So do not abandon yourself. It's like, come back. It's like, come back to center. Yeah. So it's a
Well,
foundation.
that seems to mean that you mean also do not abandon all aspects of yourself, is how I also heard it. It was very multidimensional the way
Yes.
you were riffing and flowing in that class that you were guiding.
Yeah. 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 It's true. Because all of the parts of you, the shadow, all of the parts of you, um, we tend to have good, bad, dualistic thinking around it, as opposed to um, that just is. And so
Embrace
that
it
level of
all. Is that another way
acceptance.
of saying it?
Yeah.
Embrace it all,
Yeah.
and which you spoke to, the
Yeah.
inner critic. Does that then nullify the inner divide and help integrate more wholeness or more of a whole self?
Yeah,
Because that seems to be the precipice of neutralizing that inner war. One of the, again, there's not a one step formula. It's this notion of variables that come into play that interplay in the flow of
yeah,
this art of the inner work. Do you not abandon yourself? To me, it sounds like, I'll say it this way, come home within yourself and
totally love that. I
all
love
of
that
that
phrase.
within. And that's how I heard it. When you, I was like,
Yeah,
whoa, this is hot fire.
yeah,
These are mic drop moments that Marcia's
yeah,
sharing with me in this recording. So I wanted to
yeah,
bring it up. So that is very much, I would say, a byproduct of the mastery work, right? I mean, you have to strive.
yeah,
Let's erase strive. Yeah, it's like that's almost like a sign that you know you've arrived, I would say, because you've been peppering it in these different symptoms, and then how you
yeah,
address them, and then the byproduct of what you gain: grit, capacity, ability to hold yourself, true safety from within. Now is what we're talking about with this "do not abandon yourself" statement.
yeah. Well, think of the energy that's freed up when you're not fighting yourself. Don't think of that,
Ooh.
what that gives you when you are um, okay. Oh, that's a crummy word, okay. You are, you can hold the shadow, the light, the little mini me that shows up on a regular basis. And it's like that's part of my human experience. So to make that a bad thing is egoic, and okay, and then making the ego bad is another thing. So it's a whole coming home, I love that, coming home to my self-image. Uh, Parker Palmer, whose work has been influential through mostly reading, um, that whole image he had in, I live in the Midwest, and
Hmm.
the notion that you tie a rope between the barn and the house. So when the blizzards come, which they invariably do, and think about our current leaders everywhere, like they're in blizzards, right? That you have something that tethers you back to be at home, find the home in yourself. Um, so I remember longing the journey home, the journey to wholeness. I love that idea, and I had no idea what that meant. And I kept thinking it meant polishing myself. I kept thinking it meant that there was somewhere to get to, as opposed to be here.
Embracing all of it, so to speak, or
Yeah.
finding that home within, which goes back to do not abandon yourself. It's a polarization game, and you're speaking to it. It seems
Hmm.
like the more we do that, and you called it black and white, it's an energy charge that we then continue the inner divide. We continue this holographic tug and pull with inner critic being on one side and us on the other. And you very eloquently said the, let's say, the energetic mechanics behind it all. And I oftentimes say this when it's coming out of your mouth. I love it. Free up all that energy to use elsewhere. Because underlying the work that you all guided me through last year, and as I sense, let's speak to it now. When you're in the inner critic, when you're abandoning yourself, when you're not present, when you're not noticing these reactions, all the things we've been unpacking in this first hour, you're in a constricted state or a shrinking state or there is something happening. And you talked about it earlier when you said you're locked up, you can't really, you're not, that's all tied up, blocked energy. Either you're leaking it, you're blocking it. So, from a
Hmm.
simple energetic mechanics perspective of a battery, let's say, I love how you worded that. You're freeing
Yeah.
up the energy to make use elsewhere. So, the more you notice you're doing it, the more you sit with it, the more you hold it, not trying to do something to it, the more you neutralize the charge, the more it happens on its own, so to speak.
Yeah. 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 And the freer you are.
What is then this notion of, I mean, awe and wonder is one thing, and continuing to strive, and there's a lot of dancing in the inner work, right?
Hmm.
How do you personally, how have you cultivated that home within? Because I told you before we went on air, we did the proverbial green room, and I shared a personal experience from my meditation this morning about how in the last 10 years of being initiated and stepping into this work, I had a home within, literally a little home. My inner children were there, and my shadow was there, all these
Yeah.
components and selves I had embraced and unified and integrated. How did you deal with that? And you talked about Parker Palmer and these tethers, let's say, this
Hmm.
anchor, this, I call it a headquarters. It's a way of organizing these inner constructs so you can have some semblance of, let's say, order, if we can even call it that, within this spinning madness of life. So, what
Yeah.
did that look like for you in the inner work process? How did you organize this inner landscape? How did you find your using Parker Palmer who influenced you, those tethers?
Yeah. I I'm not sure I have an answer for that. I have practices.
Okay, like what? If you can unpack them, if you're comfortable sharing, yeah.
Well, like practices like well, like meditation, um, like
What does meditation do? As you unpack them, if you don't mind me peppering in, what
mhm,
does meditation bring? So, what does meditation do for Marcia since everybody uses it different ways?
it increases my capacity to notice. It increases my capacity to pay attention to where I'm focusing my attention. You know, it's so easy to focus my attention in this finite, material, linear world. Uh, and so it's almost like a close up versus pulling back. And so the pulling back, I could take in more of what's here.
Mm.
Um, so that's mindfulness has given me that practice for
Okay.
sure. And it's also given me more embodied, a practice of embodied awareness too. Because, you know, as part of my practice, I'm checking in with what's present. Um,
So, build your
playing,
awareness muscle, meditation, mindfulness, and
yeah,
sleep. Hey,
yeah.
but what else? What other practices, if you're
Well,
comfortable?
build your awareness in the present muscle.
Mm.
So that's what mindfulness does. But also, it's like, it's just any time. I mean, how many times in a moment do I have a reaction? Like I
Mm.
notice something, right? And so that practice, that work, the work then of compassion, the practices of bringing in self-compassion, which sometimes I can just God, I'm so grateful to Wendy Palmer, who no longer walks this earth, but
Mm.
she early on did this little talk before we did the work on the physical part. And she just said, you know, sometimes you just need a there. And I thought, even you? Oh my God.
Mm.
And that that work in self-compassion, sometimes it's like majorly hard for me to find my way there. If my fear is really big, so I might go to Tonglen or something a little more um, or play Sharon Salzberg doing loving kindness meditation, but something to bring the heart into my moment.
Mm.
Um,
So, meditation, building that present awareness muscle,
mhm,
embodiment to help with the centering, self-compassion, which is, let's say, something that I'm bringing in my own personal life more and more
yeah,
to help. It
yeah,
sounds like to help embrace it, all this topic that we're riffing
exactly.
from this
To be able to
notion of
hold it.
holding oneself.
You know, another thing that's been present in my life for many, many years now is being part of a circle. Because my story listens to your story. And so that's a quote from Women in Leadership. But the things I think are real are I was like, what? I remember this is
Mm.
a long time ago. I was in this women's circle, and this one woman, and I said, you know, I wake up every day, and I think there's just not enough time in this day. And this woman in the circle goes, wow. I wake up every day and I trust that there's enough time in the day. And I think, oh my God, really? You can do that? And so being in those circles, hearing other
Mm.
people's stories puts my own in relief. And that's been really, really helpful, especially when it's done in a non-judgmental, strong holding environment where you can really, really deeply share and hold that for each other. And because I'm always more aware of myself by hearing more about you.
This leads to what I was going to ask you impromptu, so I'll ask it now because it's an organic dovetail. I didn't know this about you in preparing for the episode. I looked through your bio. I didn't know you actually own a retreat center and an art studio, which you mentioned earlier, something about art. So
Hmm.
this natural progression of circles, which is now all the rage, and we're seeing it more community-oriented, transformative
Yeah.
work models. And I mean in terms of this inner work, transformative work, what can you share with us in terms of what have you gained from owning a retreat center? Because I think it's an organic dovetail, whether you do it a retreat at your retreat center or these virtual components whether
Yeah.
early on, I sensed you meant in-person women's circle. Now we're seeing it with the rise of virtual. What can you
Right.
share in terms of the deep work you've guided in terms of retreats and circles? Because we're already in that
Well,
space. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I do no longer own that retreat. It was called a room of one's own.
Oh, okay.
And I don't have that anymore, but because we sold that property. But what was so sweet about it was I live in the Northwoods. I live on Lake Superior, Mother Superior. I live in this amazing, powerfully pay attention, be here,
Mm.
feel nature's space.
Mm.
And so I always felt like I was not doing those retreats by myself because it was always we always had the environment, as the
Literally the power
co-healer.
of nature behind you, so to
Yeah,
speak.
power of nature was huge in those retreats. I had people flying in from around the country to 100 miles north of Duluth. I mean, this is like way in the woods.
Mm,
Um, but just to have a room of your own and to be, on the largest lake in the world and in this incredibly beautiful place. And then we would co-design a retreat, just me and mostly one person, sometimes two. And we would co-design a retreat because I really believe that I'm the companion, not the driver here.
mm.
So, yeah, it was I just felt deeply moved by the number of people I got to be with for those intense times.
How do
And
you,
my,
sorry
mm,
to interject, how did you, if you're comfortable sharing while you're flowing, how did you as a practitioner design them in terms of whether it be a retreat or a circle as a practitioner now riffing with that experience that you gained, having sold it and having done it for so long?
mhm,
Let's say best practices for lack of a better description. What can you speak to in terms of, because again, you're bringing out the dance in another way, the dance of polar. It's you want it to be natural, organic, to allow the space to become its own container, which is what you're
right.
speaking to, it sounds like. And then at the same time, we need to be holistic left and right hemisphere, masculine and feminine polarity. So circles with some strategy, doing with some being. So how have you devised your circles? What can you speak to in terms of best practices to the extent you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah.
Retreats or circles, both I sense take similar formulas.
Yeah. Well, the way we started in the women's leadership communities, the way we started was let's have a plan and then let it go. So we had an overall architecture, tapping into our experience and what's the imagery of that experience or the story we've made up and um, what's really the story now and what is the movement in the newer story. That was the overall architecture back then. In the retreats I did one-on-one, it was more first we have to create a holding environment that where it's like a massage. You go slow to go deep and it's massage. So we um, we had to create a holding environment together,
Mm,
and we had to create a place where I could trust, they could trust that they would be held with, in any regard with whatever they brought.
mm,
And then we played and it was always an element of whether it was embodied work, reflective work, creative work, um, because whether it's just collaging, sometimes we have such strong um, boundaries of how we're supposed to be in the world. So how to what I found is if I played in art, movement, mything, I could tell my access an intelligence that was bigger than me. And whether it was in me or beyond me, I do not know, and I don't need to know.
mm,
But I look back, I have mythed for it's a symbolic reflection. I've done it for 25, 30 years. I look at the stuff I wrote. I had no idea what I was writing. I really had no idea what I was telling myself. And I couldn't it's like a dream. You can't like make the meaning. Oh, sometimes it's clear, but most of the time it's not. But
mm.
in those stories, I was telling myself uh, something I could live into. But I don't know how to describe it any more than that. But like more recently, well, I mean, this is more recently, 20, 15 years ago, I was writing a whole bunch of myths about being stuck. A whole bunch
Mm,
of myths about a giant in my path or a rock that longed to move or,
mm.
well, anyway, there were just stories about being stuck. And this is when I started talking with Roxanne. And at the end of that, my stories were about seeds germinating. They were about rooting. And I wasn't like making that happen. It was just where I was in a bigger way than I knew.
Well, it's fascinating because I would say those are downloads in my parlance, is that you're going to get the seeds, whether through light or sound. Those are the true natures of information. They come to the form that we are, human beingness, and it takes time to process, integrate, unpack that into our conscious field. So, like you, I've had stuff that I go back and revisit early in my sabbatical before I knew I was even going to be a teacher or a leader, whatever you call me. And then you unpack it and you go, and it's almost like it has to soak up into your consciousness because it's
Yeah.
so divinely drops in. And I love this because, again, it seems like there's variables you brought forward in terms of cultivating a circle or a retreat. You plan, then you let it go. You sense make. I think that's the new term out there that you actually sense into what's present. You're,
Mhm.
again, a more yin based practice, being embodied, presencing into it. Container. You actually create a holding environment. Another verbiage that riffs off of this double header of Deep Living Lab this season with Roxanne's episode of Sacred Holding. And it seems, and I love that. In the parlance, I've never heard it like this, like a massage. You want to go slow to go deep, really cultivate that trust. That seems to be this holding environment. Play together. I mean, who would say that? Nowadays, it's a thing. Lego, serious play, all sorts of play
Yeah.
promulgating in a sign. And then lastly, allow creation, which is where we riff from with this unpacking that you look back at your prior writings. We'll get to myth and symbolic work in a few moments. And I love that because it seems like that's, again, back to this greater intelligence that comes into the space. And
Mhm.
that allowing with the playing, with the sensing, with the containment, with the planning, a little bit of planning that you let go of. It seems like you've provided a recipe, as my shaman teacher called it, right? Different traditions. You're creating a recipe of energy. You're
Yeah.
holding
Yeah.
as a facilitator this space, a coach, a healer, whatever you call yourself, however you do it. Seems like you're devising something that formulaically is like a recipe.
Yeah. There are a couple elements in the circles that I didn't mention, what embodiment I mentioned earlier, but that was also part of it. And to practice feeling trigger center, to practice holding an intention and really hold it
Mm.
regard without regard to what was around you, like you really hold it. Um, and then the other piece was a fallow time, pausing. And I didn't mention that, but that was like key in all of these, any retreat, any of this inner work is this spacious quality that because reflexively, at least in my culture, we tend to fill things up, right? If I'm on my phone, I'm engaging in some way, as opposed to just looking or being right now.
Well, I would
So
say
I
the
think,
intention setting, I would add to the beginning stages of the formula, which is the planning and holding that intention. And it seems like the pausing, it goes to the tail end once you're playing, allowing creation. Because in it, this is what's missing, integration in all aspects I'm seeing because, and you've already unpacked it so many different ways. Your writings, because culture doesn't allow us to pause so we could absorb to optimize the uptake of these downloads in my parlance, so pausing, debriefing, somebody encouraged me to do that as I've become more well-rounded, as I've learned to be more gentle, so to speak, and
yeah,
become more
yeah.
in my feminine polarities, so to speak. In terms, again, we're going to unpack this now, and let's kind of naturally, organically get into this because we've used this parlance throughout today's episode already. This notion of circles. You didn't use this word per se. We're speaking to distributed power models. We're talking
Mhm.
about decentralization. I use this word you haven't, yin based leadership development. Let's start talking about this and start getting into this topic too, because I wanted to tee it up this way. And I know you're very humble. You've already said it today. Disclaimer, we're not healers. You're not a therapist in that sense, even if the work we're talking about dovetails, touches upon, really is adjacent to that. Similarly, I know that you wouldn't consider yourself a female, divine feminine. There's a lot of parlance around this expert. I do feel personally, and I'm honored to say this to you, that given your experience and your expertise and the fact that you actually are incarnated as a female who's been a very powerful leader, what's it been like as we bring the audience into whether they're new or familiar with the terminology that we're going to unpack? What's it been like to witness what everybody's calling the rise of the feminine around us? What's it been
Mm.
like to be a female leader from your personal experience? This isn't what you're a subject matter expert in. I wanted to touch upon this notion of feminine, rise of the feminine. What's it been like to witness that? And then let's take that organically and we'll unpack these words: yin base, leadership, distributive models, etc., circles, power of circles, etc.
Yeah. The thing about being a woman leader myself early on was I was not a representative of the archetypal feminine. I was pretty much of the dominant culture, right? I
Mm,
was of power over, um, control, archetypal masculine.
mm,
And
mm,
that's where a lot of women, that's where a lot of women maybe maybe more so than men, though a lot of men are parenting differently these days. But a
Hmm.
lot of women felt that dissonance between this heart energy at home and this hearth energy at home and then at work. I once even did a skit uh, where I was like just totally wearing the Viking helmet at work and then going home and getting confused when I was the warrior and when I was the mommy.
Hmm.
Um, so that dissonance become, women often feel that. But again, I think men are parenting in a quite different way than even a decade ago.
Hmm.
Um, but it's not it that whole denying of
Hmm.
this incredible, important, life-giving energy that men and women do carry. Um, And when it is denied, that's when destruction happens. So I love the work of Chris Hoffman, The Hoop and the Tree, where he talks about, a lot of ancient stories have power is both the tree and the hoop. It's both the circle and the
Hmm.
aspirational energy. And when you don't have the archetypal feminine uh, honored, you have destruction because it is that which is serving life. And so there was one Norse myth where a snake holds its tail. And if the snake, and that's the hoop, and it's also got the energy of the tree. And if the snake lets go, that's when it spews destruction.
Hmm.
Um, and so the notion that I feel like the rise of the feminine in all men and women is what is essential for us to heal as a culture. The
Hmm.
story of that power over is the only way.
Hmm.
The story that control is real, um, as opposed to dancing with change as it happens. It's not sustainable, and
Hmm.
we're seeing that. We're seeing that now. I was just watching Ian McGilchrist's brilliant psychiatrist out of Britain, and he was just saying that the story we have about power over and control, and that there isn't spirit anywhere, maybe, but certainly not in material things. That's a pretty limited cultural assumption that we in the West have grown up with. Um, yeah.
I love that
So
because another really denying the life-giving part of us. So if you're new to any of this and you've never heard this, you have two polarities running through you. You have the masculine and the feminine all throughout the last hour and some odd minutes while we've been dancing around and indirectly and implicating and now more directly speaking to is this polarity of the feminine, this denying the life-giving part of us, this feminine polarity, which again, these ancient myths, cultural nuances, symbols that are collectively oriented. I love the ways you brought that up. We're going to unpack more about myth in a few moments. We're imbalanced as a culture. We're not sustainable. And I love that denying the life giving part of us, becoming imbalanced within. Or as I see it, the rise of the divine feminine, it's a holistic return to our divine nature within us. Men and women have to harmonize this imbalance that
yeah.
inherited and been indoctrinated, traumatized into. And I love how you're bringing that up because you spoke to it, what it's like to be a woman, a physical incarnated woman.
Mhm.
And the Viking hat is a very, very powerful analogy for it because
Yeah.
I would say the women listening to us right now probably uniformly going to have that
Yeah.
personal experience because I would
Oh,
say that's why it's even more challenging these days. In my culture, I was raised that, and this is a very Muslim-y thing in the Islamic culture that they say the Prophet once said is that heaven is under the foot of the mother. Now, in that instance, that seems to hold up the physical woman. We're speaking again to the way you worded it, denying the life-giving part of us, being imbalanced. It's not sustainable
yeah.
as a culture anymore. Like you said, it's only destruction left. The analogy of the snake starts spewing because we're, yeah, be on my right hand, we're not being gentle. We're overcompensating as
Yeah.
individuals, and then society is then imbalanced as a byproduct because society is made up of individuals. So then the energy collectively reflects all of the imbalance. So you had it, men have it, women are struggling with it more than I sense the men because, and you hit the nail on the head again and again, it's a patriarchy. It seems to be
Hmm.
the dominant culture was hyper masculinated. We had an imbalance of doing and So I love how you worded it very, very
Yeah,
eloquently. Let's stop denying the life-giving part of us. Let's stop this dance, excuse me, this war within us that seems to be a hyperpolarization
yeah,
where we choose only one hemisphere to use mental wording, right? So there's
yep.
a lot of correlations to it. Anything else you want to riff on that? And I want to bring out more of the power of the circles and
Yeah.
yin-based stuff. More if there's any more to say about that, and then we
Well,
can
it's
dovetail to that. Yeah.
two things that came to mind as you're talking. One is the other language is power and love.
Hmm.
Uh, several authors have written about
Yes.
that, holding that
Instead of
tension.
masculine,
That because
feminine, power and love,
right,
you mean?
right,
Okay.
because it's if you've got love without the power, it's anemic. I'm paraphrasing Martin Luther King, right?
Yes.
And if you've got power without love, you've got cruelty. And
Hmm.
so, which I think we're seeing a lot of. The other thing about women leaders and people that are identify as women is a lot of the leadership development that I was part of years ago was about acclimating to the dominant environment. And so my passion was for women to find their own internally sourced voice as opposed and because that's where great leadership comes from. It's not you can't be a better leader than you are a human. So you do some healing, you can show up more strongly and more you don't abandon yourself as a leader. So that a lot of women have understandably trying to figure out how to survive in
Hmm.
this male dominated environment, and that's fine. That's what they need right then and there. But what the culture needs is women's voices strengthened.
I would say that, and for the men listening, that's strengthening the inner energy of this creative life
Yeah,
force, this life-giving part, the love part, not only the power part, the omega to the alpha. So we're here in this topic that I, again, very organically riffing and unpacking it,
yeah,
what we were intending to kind of flow through, where we source our power from as leaders. I love that you're speaking to this. We've peppered it in, and now we're seems like at this juncture point. What does that look like for you, other than what you've already unpacked? In terms of, I see it as because everything we've been unpacking is in the hidden dimensions. It's in the below the iceberg model. Let's say to use
mhm,
Roxanne and your deep living lab model. It seems like many of us are inadvertently running around sourcing to places, constructs, belief structures, systems, egregor energies, and in some cases, paranormal, inorganic entities and such, which gets real fringe. What does that mean to you? Because for me, it means literally, are you intentional and aware as to where all this is coming from within you and how you're using it? Let's speak to that. Where are we sourcing our power from as leaders in terms of harmonizing and integrating more of ourselves? Where do you want to go with that? If it feels resonant to riff on this a bit.
well, I bet you talk about this for yourself, Haas. I know I can feel the difference when my action is coming from a whole body place, So that's and people feel the difference. And it's there's a lot again, I'm a lot more soft or malleable to whatever happens with the result of that, um, but my feet are on the ground. I have the roots. And I have a receptivity or openness to you and other in a way. I'm not attached. You don't need you can be who you are. And I have a solidity in my own being. And so that
Mhm.
feels I bet you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
you
yeah. Keep
feel
flowing.
you feel the difference in your being. Um, and the more we do the inner work, the more we uh, integrate the word you've used, the more we have softened the hold of our constrictions, the more we can operate from engage in the world from a really I don't know, power is the right word, but
True power,
um,
holistic power. It sounds
yeah,
like what we're speaking.
yeah.
Powerful love, or wait for it. Drum roll, please. Vulnerable power.
Yeah.
Branding
Yeah.
drop.
Well, you know what's so cool? What's so cool was this is years ago now, but this guy who does research in leadership, he found that the great leaders had both courage and heart. That wasn't exactly his words, Jim Collins, but it was like It's like, yeah, it was both and it was the integration of your whole humanity. Those are the great leaders where they could have the guts to say the tough stuff and make tough decisions, and yet operate it open-heartedly and in service to life in a bigger way.
1,000,000%. This is, again, we're going to this whole body. I like how you word that whole body. You're sourcing from a whole body place, from a holistic place, from all parts of you, from the home, not the reactive, because I would say that's the problem. I mean, the whole episode is touching on this, that we're running in a reactive culture. We're numb and disassociated, and we're not building these muscles, this advanced inner work topic. And as we progress, we then come more back online, more of our natural self, more whole bodied intelligence, all the stuff we've talked about throughout this time together. And it sounds like then you're sourcing from an intentional place. And there's a case law in the business judgment rule in corporate shareholder liability, that realm of law. There's a case called the Van Gorkum case, and it literally is the analogy I oftentimes use with leaders in my new iteration, no longer a corporate lawyer, is that case said, look, a leader, a corporate leader, is liable only in the instance they're asleep behind the wheel. The difficulty is using that as an analogy. That's what's happening in the collective. Leaders are asleep
Hmm.
behind the wheel. They're sourcing from all these places. And I love how you said it. You're bringing a whole body, you're coming from a heart, all the things we've talked about. You can use them as synonyms. There's a wholeness to you. You've integrated. You're coming from a holistic power, a loving power, courageous and confident. There's no polarity or war within you or
Yeah,
strife within you.
yeah. 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 And when you describe the culture and the struggle, part of me just wants to go there to everybody. It's like, it's not like it's wrong. It's just we're doing the best we can,
Correct.
and we can support each other in coming from a more solid place.
There's a lot of magic there because I would say that self-compassion, even I know you quoted it to Wendy Palmer and maybe a couple others. There is this magic to, even on the neuroscience, of when we put our hands on our heart, when we literally say, it's okay, this is me, it's safe to feel all of it. Whatever words you use there, more
Hmm.
self-compassion command. A lot of magic happens. I would say it goes back to almost the beginning of the episode. The magic of then being with it, holding it, allows it
Hmm.
to self-organize and bring healing to itself. So
Yeah.
let's talk about myths, the home stretch, because that takes us into this
Yeah.
practical portion. Not that the whole episode
Yeah.
hasn't been practical and you've peppered in various practices along the way, because we've unpacked it so much and you've mentioned it so much. The power that myths
Yeah.
had for you, symbolic work had for you, and then we've touched on so much. The myths we adopt, the stories we tell ourselves. So let's go into pure multidimensional realms here, where we then adopt constructs, things, or we write books that we didn't even know
Yeah.
had all these layers to it, or we're writing books or stories consistently about being blocked, and suddenly they're
Right.
about seeds germinating. Your analogy, all go to this topic that we're in the home stretch on. Talk about myths and playing in the symbolic realm, what that's been like for you, and then we'll kind of
Mm.
unpack it into the exercise together.
Well, let me tell you two different stories. One was women in leadership, our first round of inviting women in. And my colleague said, I think we should write myths. I was like, yeah, right. And so we did, well, I had to go along. I was co-facilitator. Um, and we did a little reflection on our ancestry, just a little bit about the women that we come from.
Hmm.
And then we were to go off, and the only guides was Once Upon a Time. That's it, just once upon a time,
Hmm.
and just see what comes. And I think I maybe had one or two false starts before I had Once Upon a Time. There was a woman who held up the world, uh, and
Say that one more time. Once upon a time, finally, what was the words that came out?
there was a woman who held up the world,
Ah, interesting.
uh, and she had these children whose jobs were to clean the clouds and polish the stars or whatever. And however, as it evolved, one of the children ended up taking her spot, which was me. Um,
Hmm.
but I could not tell you that story without crying for a decade because it was just so captured the truth of my situation at that time.
Hmm.
Um, and from there, it was just once upon a time. There wasn't, there's like different guides now, like the Pixar pitch guide, how to write a story. But once upon a time, and then whatever. And then the second story was, it's a little embarrassing to tell this one, but when I had the art gallery, I don't anymore. When I had the art gallery, across the street was a spiritual director who was looking at my husband's bells. He's a metal sculptor. And she was looking at his bells, and I was saying, oh, all those bells have symbols that have meaning. She goes, oh, I know. And I said, oh, do you work with symbols? She goes, yeah, I work with sand play. It's like, oh, cool. And I said, I work with collaging. Um, anyway, she said, well, come over. We'll do some sand play. And so I don't know if you know about sand play, it's Jungian, but it's all these little objects and literally a tray of sand and all these little objects. And you don't think, you just grab objects and create an arrangement in this tray of sand. In my tray of sand, I buried a black man in a mountain and put a high chair on top.
Hmm.
And I thought, oh my God, oh my God, what have I done? It had other features to it.
Hmm.
But I thought, okay, there's something here.
Hmm.
And I still always started studying sand play for a number of years because working with objects, just like mything, was like, what am I telling myself now? I don't think I want to know, but what am I telling myself now? So those two pieces, I've done collaging, which, sort of image cards, there's different things people talk about, which is a really accessible way in. Just
Hmm.
think of a question or something and grab a bunch of magazines and don't think and just make a collage, simple something. Um, that is
It
often a
sounds like it
great
mirrors
entry
auto
point.
writing. Sorry to interrupt. It sounds like it mirrors auto writing. I mean, it's not, again, you're getting into very advanced stuff. I love it. More advanced than I was intending. So that's great. We're getting very multi-dimensional because here's how I hear you so far. And I know I
Okay,
interjected.
what? Yeah,
Everything's energy. We're energetic beings. We have a consciousness, and at a sub and super conscious level, at the underworld and higher world, we're absorbing stuff. Ideas are nothing more than energy. These are myths, symbols, constructs embedded in the collective field and in our individual fields. So I love
yeah.
that you're taking us already into altered states of consciousness work. I mean, that's how I would see what you're doing.
It's so funny. I love that. I love we come from such different worlds, Haas.
Yes.
I love hearing your interpretations of these things.
Well, because I mean,
Uh,
look at what happened. It's
yeah,
like you're carrying something in your biofield unconsciously. We're back to the Van Gogh come. We're all these things happening in our field, and until we do this inner exploration, inner work, as we call it today, and you're like, and then we're scared to go into these hidden dimensions. Here you're talking about, and I interjected here, this sandbox tool, black guy buried, high chair. I mean, as a white woman, you're feeling all, and it's like, oh, I would say as a mystic, I'm picking, oh, well, I mean, it's not far of a leap in America.
yeah,
You may have, I
yeah,
mean, did you own ancestors? So you're almost accessing an altered state, a non-linear way, a greater knowing of stuff you're holding that you
yeah.
had no freaking clue you were holding.
Exactly, exactly. I still couldn't tell you exactly what that trade was, but I'll tell you that getting into, and then it turns out one of the international experts in sand play, I live in the woods, lives within 100 miles of me. So I could go study with her for years and do my own trays. So yeah,
Have you
I don't
studied
know.
with, or you said you have studied
I
with?
did, I did, I
So
did.
you've
I
done
would,
all sorts of different forms and tools. Again, why I teed you up the way I did a couple, almost a hour and some odd minutes ago. So let me ask you a curveball. Let me throw a curveball in here because it seems like through your lens, it seems to be a agreement that there is also collective energies and myths and symbols or constructs. What do we do when they're, let's say, there's also sacred or natural archetypes or symbols? You mentioned
mhm.
some of them earlier with the hula hoop and the, embodying love and power, alpha and omega. What do we do with a sacred archetype or symbol, or let's say it's not even sacred one, it's a man-made one? What do we do when we have corrupted, let's say, or desecrated symbols and myths? Because we've danced around it, we haven't verbatim said it, this cowboy leadership that's rampant in the West,
Mhm.
right? Is a patriarchal sense, this alpha, non-gentle power without the love, different word, power without the vulnerable, right? Alpha without the omega. Or another myth that you introduced when we last spoke, getting ready for today's episode, this notion of the isolation myth that so many light workers, spiritual leaders, healers, way showers deal with, that I'm alone in this. How can you speak to it, since you are I would say, more of a myth expert than I am. I mean, you've been trained in it, it sounds like. Well, you have been. I mean, I know you're a very humble leader. There, you have more actual training in it. How can we speak to that? Because that's something I'm personally fascinated by, the corruption of the codex of the collective, the corruption of
Yeah,
archetypes and symbols that, let's say, that even the sacred ones, because we've done
yeah,
some of that as a collective, I sense, without realizing it.
yeah,
How do
we
you
have.
feel about that, or what feels inspired to speak to from your experience on that? If nothing, that's okay.
I don't think I know much about that. I really don't. I feel like,
Well, if you want to talk about it through the cowboy leadership lens, since that's what you
yeah, I
introduced,
mean, it's,
I didn't hear that vernacular before I spoke to you about doing this episode. So I was like, oh, that's
yeah, the
interesting.
individualistic hero. I
Yeah.
mean, we're just so attached to that in
I
our
had it in
cultures.
me. I would agree with you. Yeah. Yeah.
Save me, hero, cowboy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll confess I had that. You saw it in my wording earlier. Tackle, you caught
yeah,
it and brought some
yeah, yeah,
awareness
yeah,
into it. Yeah, I'd agree. Do, do, do,
yeah.
do. Let me save the day.
You know,
Hero.
I don't, I think it's, man, I don't know about healing that. I mean, I come back to maybe storytelling. Maybe it's sharing. Maybe it's like, because if without a deeper understanding, it's not about judging it. It's just like, okay,
Go there. It seems
let's
like
go
you're
back.
inviting
Let's go back
going
to the
there.
source.
Hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's I see it within religion about what's being espoused as being so distant from the original
Bingo.
teachings. Um, and it's like, well, I don't know that I could convince you anything else, but maybe if I heard your story, maybe if you heard mine, and
Hmm.
maybe if we connected and as humans, and maybe if you heard the stories of those who are really different, um, that might open our hearts a bit. I really don't
Well,
know.
that's interesting because you're almost in a way presenting circles and the South Africa apartheid model in a way, because
Yeah.
circles where we inclusively share the stories. Because if we take your formula from earlier, and I'm going to be the energy engineer here and say, we take your formula of intention setting, planning and letting it go, sensing, holding the container environment in a trusting way, playing together, allowing the co-creative energy to come through, and then allowing space to pause and integrate. If we apply that to this very topic, we may be able to, as a collective, restore some natural myths or templates that have been desecrated or warped, my verbiage.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love you've got a gift at summarizing. I don't remember saying all that, but that's so cool. I love that gift you have, Haas, of
That's what happens when a
distill.
Capricorn South Node gets with a Leo South Node. We bring our respective soul dharmas together and we co-create as we are unpacking right
That's so
now.
great. That's so great.
So you said something, and now let's get to the exercise. You said, and I want to ping you here, see if it resonates. And if you remember, you said to me last time we spoke, you channeled this and brought this through, and you had one of those like, whoa, what did I say here? Leadership for you, this is what seems to be your mission, and the way you worded it is leadership that is in service to life and promotes the
Mm,
expansion of what our collective is capable of becoming. And that was your answer when I asked you to tune in to your greater sourcing from a whole embodied knowing of what's your intention for co-creating today together. What does that mean to you now, hearing it from me several weeks after you originally downloaded it or transmitted it? How does that land
mm.
to you? Is there anything you want to riff? And then let's bring it home with the exercise of mything, so to speak, and anything
Yeah.
mything. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what we've been talking about this whole time, Haas. I mean, in service to life, that whole bringing the archetypal feminine or bringing the heart, integrating our beings, um, deepening understanding of what human being is. Uh, and with that, there's so much capacities that get unleashed, so much more ability to um, live my gift. I don't know. Yes, it still
And it seems
resonates a
like
lot.
daring to go there is undertone or an undercurrent of what you're saying, because
Yeah,
I know I interjected on the mything. You were riffing on and flowing through how you dared to go there. You dared to go into the hidden, even if it was nuts, even if your Western American upbringing from the Midwest is like, this is crazy, man.
yeah,
What you're gonna
yeah,
guide me through. I'm a little
yeah,
bit more
yeah,
ready to be crazy
yeah,
finally.
yeah, yeah,
You know, it sounds like you dared to go there, which is the permission slip of the show, which is why I do the show. One of my undercurrents of when I downloaded Vulnerable Power on the Mountain 6 years ago, I didn't know. I was like, what? Oh, what? This is a show? What the heck is this thing? here we are. I would say
Yeah.
you're almost like daring us in a healthy way, not in a holistic way. A loving, daring invite. Let me add that word to round it out. A
I
daring
love that. I
invite.
love
Daring
that.
invite. You see that the being gentle, bringing that
Yeah.
holistically, practicing
Yeah.
from Maestro here. Um, it sounds like providing a daring invite. You're saying, look, don't be afraid to go there. Don't be afraid to
Yeah.
go into this inner exploration because I would say that's very like, wow. I mean, go you. You weren't raised in a mythical culture. I was born biologically near two of the most famous, Hafez and Sadi, two of the most famous, like Rumi's contemporaries. So it's
Wow.
natural for me to be the brown guy who talks about kooky, multidimensional stuff. For you, I mean, that was scary, right? To go
Oh
into the
God,
sand
yes.
work and be like, holy jeez, Louise, what
I
does this
know.
mean about me?
I know. I know. I know. Yeah. And then to bring it into my practice. So, and I've now the thing we're going to do, you and
Yeah.
I, I have done with engineers and scientists and a variety of people. And at first they're like, "Oh, yeah, oh, great. Don't doesn't have to work. Don't be attached. Just we're just going to try to access a different way of thinking about whatever question you're working with today." Okay. So are you ready to play
I'm ready.
and
So,
try this?
audience, this is the practical portion. We love to leave you
Yeah.
with some the genius of the guest, and I'm the guinea pig. So, you all can literally take part, pause, and re-listen to this recording anytime you want. You can take part yourself. So, I'm ready.
Yeah. Well,
Guide
what
me,
would be
maestro.
fun? Well, what would be fun, but we don't have time for them, would be to myth, to actually do a once upon a time, but that takes more time.
Okay.
So in a shorter version, just kind of get yourself back grounded, feel your feet and notice your breath, just to get yourself situated here in this moment. Notice what's present in your body, etc., around you. We're doing this just to invite in what's the question you want to work right now. You might have a really clear question, you may not. No, don't be attached. But there might be something coming up. It's like, this is a question I'd love to explore in a different way without, just get around my, you could call it my mental limits, but to try to access a deeper reflection on this particular question. So I don't know, Haas, if
I've
you
got
have
one.
something
Yeah,
popping.
dropped in,
You got one?
maestro. Is how to
Okay.
share more, unpack more of my genius and share it in the work I do. That's
Okay.
the question that popped in intuitively.
Okay. So don't let the question, don't hold it tightly. And
Letting it
we're
go.
going to we're going to do one form of what's could be a four-part process, but that'll take too long. So we just do the first part.
Okay.
So with your dominant hand,
Okay.
open your eyes, start with your dominant hand, find something that your dominant hand is attracted to, right or left hand. Anything in your environment. You
I
got it
thought I was gonna
already.
grab I have lots of things on here. I thought I was gonna
There
grab
it
one of
is.
those.
Okay.
Instead, I'm grabbing the Enneagram. My hand's like,
Okay.
grab this. Okay. Again, non-thinking. I love how your guy
Okay,
keeps flowing.
terrific.
Yeah.
So now what you're going to do, and give yourself a little bit of space. And folks, if you're doing this, watching this, give yourself even more space than what we're going to do right now. But I want you to, do you have a pen and paper in near you,
Yes,
Haas?
ma'am. The whole time
Okay.
I've been taking notes for the audience.
Okay. So I want you to just wait until you hear that object talk to you. So you might think you want to hear that object's voice, but just wait and see if there's anything that that object has to tell you about your gift or about anything that it thinks would be helpful for you to know right now.
So right away, I did notice there was, I like how you differentiated it. Yeah, there was like a mental, subtle, this is the
Hmm.
voice. And then
Yeah.
I quieted that, embraced that. And then it's very faint. I'm getting sensations.
You could just talk to us since we're doing this as a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
recording.
It's a very good job because now you you got me where I take clients. Because usually what they'll say is what I'm saying, which is I don't have the words. Let me unpack the words. It's coming.
Yeah.
I'm feeling palpable sensations from my heart coming out. So it's again back to what you've been saying this whole episode. It seems to be a greater intelligence coming through Haas as I
Mm.
dial into the object representing that knowing.
Okay.
So let's see what it's saying. Let me go deeper. Any guidance on how to take it deeper from your side
Nope.
of it?
You just listen and don't be attached. It might be just talk to you later. It might be
Now, this is interesting. I think Roxanne would love this. I'm seeing different elements of the since I am holding the Enneagram logo or symbol.
Mm,
I'm seeing different images. It's like moving, which something's happening. It's very multidimensional. Yeah, it's interesting because there seems to be a blockage. And it's the
yeah,
very
yeah,
theme of this exercise. It seems like there's
hmm,
something my mind is exerting that's blocking me from deepening on the spot.
yeah. Well, and it might be, yeah, we're in a time sensitive environment.
Correct. Yeah.
And I have not done it with verbal. I've always had people write.
I was going to
And so
ask, should I auto write and see if that's
yeah,
okay? And you
that
beat
might
me to it.
be,
Okay. So hold
yeah,
on. So auto writing, for those that don't know, you basically start writing and don't think.
just see what comes.
Oh, this is interesting. Hmm. I'm having my own bearing the black guy putting a high chair moment. It's like, really? This is coming out of me? One of those like,
Really?
what was hidden in the under the surface? So far I have you know what to do. Face the past fear within you. Hug your ghost. Is what's
Mm,
come out so far, which is funny because we did an episode with this really powerful ascension teacher Wolfgang called "Healing Your Ghost." Got into very advanced entities and stuff, and my brain is like, "Is it mean that?" And I'm getting a no. There's something else behind that.
mm.
So let me go one step further. Let me see what else flows through my pen, and then I got the words "They love you." So I would say this speaks to, because I've done so much work around various fears, this speaks to my fear of being judged or persecuted, what they call in the New Age languaging the witch wound. Many advanced
Yeah,
leaders that are gifted have this. I sense you've run into it in your woo-woo trainings here and there as well. I would say that it's a fear that I'm going to be persecuted as an outcast. That's what's coming through is that there seems to be some more soul trauma healing around being accepted and then my authentic
mm,
voice versus my inauthentic voice, which was where my question came from, which was more
sure.
how do I share more authentically my genius without grandstanding, let's say, or coming off as if I'm trying to prove myself, which was where the question I sense came from. That's what I
You
got.
might,
Yeah.
that's lovely. And you might, again, not today, but you
Yeah.
might, with that question, go with a non-dominant hand and see what else you find and listen. Sometimes writing with your non-dominant hand helps too because it slows you down. Um,
So if
because
the audience were to continue it, that's what you'd recommend as the next
do the
phase.
next one. Yeah, because it's never just one point. You want to look at things more holistically, right? So uh,
Any other instructions
often.
you would normally give for the sake of time for them to hear it, and then they could always pause and do those steps?
I have done this at rental houses. I've done it everywhere. So you can be in the like, a kitchen or wherever. Um, just give yourself the time to feel. So the dominant hand sort of feels, and I had to pick things that I found appalling. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, why did I pick that? But
Correct.
but
Yeah.
but then you start writing in. It's a little different than auto writing in terms of like, or free fall writing is what I call it. But that's a way to get started. If that's what it takes, just start writing or just listen until.
It's get the
And
flow going, so to speak. Get that
yeah,
transmission going through you and
yeah,
nurture it, so to speak.
it's been surprising um, how it's kind of opened me up around a question. Um, and again, don't be attached. It may or may not work. But we're just playing. And when you're just playing, you open up possibilities you may not have seen before.
Well, again, that invitation of daringly going and playing in the symbolic realm, let's call it that,
Yeah.
these hidden dimensions that we've been so potently going through today together, this notion of really by going deep, right? We truly, so much we've talked about, we truly come alive. I mean, for you, you talked about at the very beginning of today, you lost your laughter, right? By
Hmm.
doing this work, you revive so much. So much comes back home. You come back home so much more, or what I call you bring back more soul, so to speak. And we can live in that great mystery, to use mystical terminology. We can live in the unknown in any trying time, no matter what's going on. If you cultivate that within, you literally can thrive as a leader no matter what's going on outside of you. I mean, we're not guaranteeing that. I would say that's what's made you feel more centered in probably one of the most prolific times to be alive. This is
Yeah.
prophecies that spoke to this time. And so I love that you're inviting us into the symbolic realm and you've provided another tool very practically and
Thanks.
experientially for us to explore.
And the
Anything
thing
else to
is,
round us
well,
out?
I just must
Yeah.
say this work is practical. It might seem like a luxury, or it might seem like, um, uh, yeah, not like what am I going to get from this kind of thing? But it's really practical because with this precious life, how do I express what I've been given? And how do I do it in a way? And I have the resilience to deal with whatever life is, and lots of crazy things are happening. How do I have the resilience to be with what's happening in this world? So it's not just a luxury, that really is an essential part of human development. So,
I mean, brilliantly put to a very mic drop moment because I would say I'm running into people more and more, whether they're young and they want to create something to change the world, or some people that are on the later stages of their life that want to leave a living legacy. We're seeing it more and more to use my parlance, this soul's calling, oh, I want to make a change happen. And I love your invitation because by doing it from within, because if we're touching on as we wrap up the benefits. So many people may see it, as you put it, as luxury, or they may go one step further and go, oh, this only helps me with resilience or self-care or well-being.
yeah,
There are direct benefits to business performance and stuff that we cover in this season, actually, in other episodes. So I love that you rounded us out with that because I would say
yeah.
that's the purpose of my mission, where I sense you and I dovetail. And I love what you all are doing at the Deep Living Lab and the work you've been doing and continue to do. So leave us here. What's the upcoming book? Because you did say there is an upcoming book. You told me off the air. It seems like this is going, you're taking,
Oh, mine?
yeah,
Yeah,
yours.
mine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yours. Because
Well,
this is also about Marcia, and we'll wrap up.
yeah.
What Have I Missed that you gifted me is the book you birthed through a while back. It seems
Long
like
time ago. Yeah.
now Marcia, practicing what she preaches, is even continuing all of what we've talked about today, her growth, and is now going, I'm going to unpack this book into a new book or something's happening. What's
Yeah.
happening there? Yeah.
It's called Reflections on Becoming the Best of Ourselves. It's derived from a radio show I've done for 16 years, but it's little essays about what have I learned. And I started it as a letter to my grandchildren, and pulling this together for them. So it is available to the family and hopefully available to the world within the next 6 months. So,
And I would dare say that that's all this inner work. I mean, that sounds like what this project alone is very fulfilling for you, I would imagine.
and hard.
Well,
And hard.
oftentimes the golden nuggets, as Campbell said, the treasures we seek are in the darkest places. The most
Yeah,
grueling
yeah,
ventures must be
yeah.
had.
But when you think about these precious beings in our lives, and if anything can touch them or support them in their journey, man, I'm there.
So it
So
sounds
there
like
we
you've
are.
come alive. It sounds like you
Yeah,
gained back your laughter. It sounds like you brought
yeah,
more soul back to
yeah,
Marcia over these decades of doing inner work and now guiding others.
yeah. And I'm sure I'm not done, Haas. I'm still
Oh,
here.
yeah,
I'm not
I
done.
told you that. I was like, you're not done, my soul sister. And unfortunately, we are done
We are
on this
done. Yes.
episode. So I want to thank Marcia for being here, representing herself, her practice, Deep Living Lab as well. And I want to thank each of you for joining us, whether you joined through Marcia's audience, my audience, or the global audience, however you found us. We trust that this episode brought you more practical wisdom, more inspiration, so you could feel empowered and encouraged to step into your own inner work at deeper and deeper levels, to come back alive so you can do what you came here to do, so you could be who you came here to be and feel more alive, more fulfilled. So together we can activate more heart and soul in leadership around the world. Thank you for joining us this season, and I'll look forward to seeing you all, hopefully, what'll be the sixth season of the Vulnerable Power Show. Much love and blessings.